In the year 2150, Earth was no longer just a planet of humans. Humans had spread across the galaxy, reaching planets far beyond the stars. Along the way, they made friends with many different alien species. Some were peaceful, others were more mysterious. But all of them had their own cultures and stories, but nothing could have prepared Earth for the strange and unexpected event that would change the lives of many. A spaceship from the far reaches of the galaxy crash-landed on Earth. The ship, which was once the pride of an alien civilization, was now a twisted wreck. On board were survivors' alien girls, all alone, lost, and scared. They were young, too young to be left without protection. Each girl was from a different planet, a different species. But they all shared one thing. They were orphans now. The crash was a disaster. The alien girls had come from a peaceful world that had been destroyed in an attack. They were the last survivors of their kind, and now they had nowhere to go. They were in shock, confused, and frightened. Human governments around the world were quick to react, sending teams to rescue the girls from the wreckage. Medical teams, scientists, and ambassadors gathered to help. It was clear these girls were not like humans. Their skin was strange, with colors that shimmered like the stars. Their eyes glowed in the dark, and they had abilities that humans couldn't even begin to understand. It was obvious that these girls needed help, but no one knew how to provide it. The world's leaders decided to set up an adoption program. They hoped that humans would take these girls in, raise them, and give them the love and care they needed. But things didn't go as planned. The human dilemma at first. Many humans were hesitant. Some feared the alien girls, not knowing what kind of powers they might possess. Others didn't want to risk the unknown, especially with Earth still dealing with its own problems. The adoption process became a mess. Each time a potential family was chosen to adopt one of the girls, something went wrong. The families turned away. They were afraid. The girls were too different, too strange. The girls, in their sadness, began to lose hope. Every time they thought they might find a place to belong, they were rejected. It was heartbreaking, but there was one person who didn't care about the politics of the situation. He didn't care about alien races, or politics, or even the future of Earth's relationships with other planets. His name was Grayson Holt. Grayson wasn't like most people. He wasn't a hero, and he didn't want to be one. Once a soldier in Earth's military, Grayson had seen too much. Too many battles, too many losses. After his time in the military, he withdrew from society, choosing to live in quiet isolation. He didn't care for the government or its plans for intergalactic unity. He didn't care about anything, really. He just wanted to live alone in peace. That was until the government knocked on his door, Grayson's. Reluctance. It was a rainy day when they came to him. Two officials, dressed in formal uniforms, arrived at his home. They brought with them the latest request. Grayson had been asked to adopt one of the alien girls. He wasn't sure what they were thinking. Why him? He hadn't asked for any part in this. The officials told him that no one else had stepped forward to adopt one of the girls. In fact, they had been rejected by almost every family they had approached. "Mr. Holt, you are being asked because of your past experience," one of the officials said, nervously adjusting his glasses. "The government believes you could offer the kind of tough, no-nonsense approach these girls need. They're not from here. They need structure, discipline, guidance." Grayson stared at them, his expression cold. "And you think I'm the right man for this job? I've been out of the military for years. I don't have the patience for this." "Whatever this is," the officials persisted, "it's not just about patience, Mr. Holt. It's about protection. These girls are vulnerable. And right now, they have nowhere to go." Grayson didn't respond right away. He didn't want to get involved in this mess, but something inside him stirred. He had always been good at taking care of others, even if he didn't want to admit it. Maybe that was why the government had chosen him. Despite his gruff exterior, he had a sense of duty. Finally, Grayson sighed and rubbed his face. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll do it. But I'm not going to be their friend, and I'm not going to be their family. I'll make sure they're fed and safe, and that's it." The officials were relieved, thanking him and promising that they would bring one of the girls to his home the next day. Grayson didn't care about their gratitude. He just wanted this to be over, the first meeting the next morning. The girl was brought to Grayson's small home in the outskirts of the city. She was small and fragile-looking, with skin that shimmered a pale lavender under the sunlight. Her eyes glowed softly, and her hair seemed to change color depending on the angle of the light. She was clearly scared, her wide eyes looking up at Grayson as if he were a strange creature himself. The officials left quickly, and Grayson was left standing with the girl. She looked up at him, but didn't speak. She didn't know Earth's language yet, and he had no idea how to communicate with her either. There was an awkward silence between them. Grayson let out an exasperated sigh. "All right, kid," he said gruffly. "Let's get one thing straight. I don't do cuddles or talks. You stay out of my way and I'll make sure you don't starve." The girl didn't move, still staring at him, unsure of how to react. Grayson frowned. He couldn't tell if she understood him or not. It didn't matter, though. He wasn't going to let her get to him. This wasn't his problem. He was just doing his duty. But then, as Grayson turned to walk away, he noticed something unexpected. The girl was still watching him. Her glowing eyes followed him as he moved, and despite her silence, there was something almost pleading in her gaze. Grayson paused. For a moment, he thought he saw a glimmer of something in her eyes, something familiar. He shook his head, brushing it off. No, he wasn't here to care. He wasn't here to be a father. He was here to do his duty and get this over with. A startling realization days went by. Grayson kept his distance from the girl, whose name he learned was Sorry. She followed him around, trying to understand the strange customs of Earth, and Grayson did his best to teach her the basics. But it wasn't easy. She didn't speak much, and when she did, her words were strange and sounded like a mix of different languages. But Grayson could tell she was trying. One evening, Grayson returned home to find Sorry sitting at the kitchen table, holding a small object in her hands. It was a broken piece of Earth's technology, a little toy car that Grayson had forgotten about years ago. Sorry looked up at him, her glowing eyes full of curiosity. Grayson stared at her, feeling a strange tug in his chest. It was an odd sensation, one he wasn't used to. "Did you fix that?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. She nodded, though she didn't speak. Grayson chuckled, his gruffness returning. "You're smarter than you look," Sorry smiled. A small, tentative smile. And in that moment, Grayson realized something. This wasn't just some alien girl. She was a survivor, just like him. She didn't need pity. She didn't need someone to take care of her. She needed someone who could understand her struggle. Grayson's heart, she thought was buried deep under layers of anger and disappointment, began to soften. Maybe, just maybe, this wouldn't be as bad as he thought. Grayson sat down in his favorite armchair, rubbing his tired eyes. It had been a long day. His life had always been simple, if not a little too quiet. He had gotten used to it. No responsibilities, no expectations. Just him and his thoughts in his small, peaceful home. That was the way he liked it, but things were different now. Sorry. The alien girl had been living with him for almost 2 weeks. And although he hadn't shown it, Grayson had started to notice things. She was always there, quietly watching him with those glowing silver eyes. She never asked for much, only followed him around, trying to understand Earth's ways. It wasn't easy. She didn't speak much, and when she did, her words didn't always make sense. But that didn't stop her from trying. It almost seemed like she was determined to learn. It wasn't just her effort that bothered Grayson, though. It was the way she seemed to make his life more complicated. For instance, she had a habit of sneaking into the kitchen when Grayson wasn't looking, trying to make food even though she didn't understand how anything worked. He'd walk in to find a mess, a bunch of fruit all over the floor. And Sorry, standing in the middle of it, looking guilty but hopeful. "Kid, you can't just throw things together and hope they turn into food," Grayson would grumble, even though he couldn't help but chuckle. But every time, Sorry would look at him with those big, hopeful eyes, as if asking for approval. One evening, he'd caught her trying to make a sandwich. But instead of using bread, she had taken slices of raw vegetables, piling them on top of each other in a messy tower. It was a disaster. Grayson didn't know whether to laugh or sigh. All right. You can't eat that," he said, shaking his head. "Let me show you how it's done." He didn't expect her to understand at first, but as he began to prepare the food, he noticed she was watching him closely. Her eyes were focused, studying every movement. And when he handed her the sandwich, a small smile broke across her face. It wasn't perfect, but she'd tried. Grayson had to admit that was something. Despite his gruff exterior, Grayson had started to feel something. It was a strange feeling, one he hadn't experienced in a long time. He'd spent most of his life pushing people away. But now, with Sari in his life, there was a quiet part of him that wanted to protect her. A growing understanding as the days passed. Grayson's walls started to crack, though he tried his best not to show it. He still wasn't sure how to feel about having Sari around. She was from another planet, for crying out loud. She was nothing like him. And yet, there was something in the way she looked at him that made him feel like she wasn't just a stranger. She was smart. Grayson had noticed that. She was quick to learn, whether it was how to use a knife in the kitchen or how to fix small broken gadgets. It was like she was always observing, always trying to understand the world around her. Grayson was impressed, though he wouldn't admit it out loud. One afternoon, he found her sitting in the living room, flipping through one of his old books. It was one of those books about Earth's history, the kind he never had much interest in. But there she was, staring intently at the pages, as if every word fascinated her. "You like that stuff?" Grayson asked, surprised. He hadn't expected her to be interested in something so boring. Sari looked up, then nodded slowly. She didn't speak. But there was something in the way she nodded that made Grayson realize she understood more than she let on. "You know," Grayson said, sitting down across from her, "this stuff's pretty dry. But if you want to learn about Earth, I guess I could give you the short version." Sari's eyes lit up. She reached out and grabbed a pencil, holding it ready in her hand as if she was about to take notes. Grayson chuckled. "Well, all right. Earth's history is full of war and peace, up and down. A lot of mistakes and a lot of lessons. But the one thing we always seem to get right is survival. People may fight each other, but when it comes down to it, they always find a way to survive." Sari scribbled something in her notebook, looking at him intently. Grayson didn't know exactly what she was writing, but he couldn't help but smile. She was trying, really trying, to understand his world. The test of patience, and though Grayson had begun to soften towards Sari, it wasn't always easy. Her powers, though not fully controlled, were starting to show more often. She didn't mean to, but every time she got emotional, something strange would happen. One night, after a particularly frustrating day, Grayson found himself looking at the ceiling, wishing for some peace. But that wasn't what he got. Sari had been upset about something. She wasn't sure how to express it. She seemed to be frustrated with herself. Her eyes were glowing brighter than usual, and as Grayson was about to speak to her, the lights in the room flickered. Then, with a loud hum, the television across the room turned on by itself. "Not again," Grayson muttered. He stood up, walking over to the TV and turning it off. Sari looked at him, wide-eyed and apologetic. "Sorry," she whispered. Grayson sighed but didn't yell. "You've got to control that. You can't just go around making things go haywire every time you get upset." "We're going to need to work on that." Sari lowered her head, clearly embarrassed. She hadn't meant to cause any problems. She simply didn't know how to control her emotions, especially with everything being so new to her. Grayson sighed again, rubbing the back of his neck. He felt a strange sort of sympathy for her. He knew what it was like to feel out of control, to feel lost. It was something they had in common, even though they came from entirely different worlds. "Look, kid," he said softly, "I'm not going to pretend to know what you're going through, but you need to try. We need to figure this out. For both of our sakes." Sari nodded, still not looking him in the eye. Grayson sat back down, his tough exterior cracking just a little. She wasn't perfect, and neither was he. But maybe they could learn together. A quiet understanding, the days turned into weeks. And Grayson found himself getting used to having Sari around. She was quieter now, but there were moments when she would try something new, like fixing a broken tool or drawing pictures of things she didn't quite understand. Her alien drawings, with their strange shapes and bright colors, were unlike anything Grayson had ever seen. They were beautiful in their own way. One evening, as Grayson returned home from a quick trip to the store, he found Sari sitting by the window, looking out at the stars. Her face was soft, almost sad. "Everything okay?" Grayson asked, setting the groceries down on the counter. Sari turned to him, her glowing eyes reflecting the lights from outside. She didn't speak, but there was a quiet sadness in her gaze. Grayson walked over, standing beside her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just watched the stars, both of them lost in their thoughts. "I know you miss home," Grayson said finally, his voice low. "I can't imagine what it's like, being so far from everything you've ever known." Sari nodded slowly, though she didn't answer. Grayson wasn't sure why he said what he said next, but it felt right. "You're not alone, though. You've got me now. And I'm not going anywhere." For the first time since she arrived, Sari looked up at him with a soft smile. It wasn't a big smile, but it was enough to let Grayson know that, for all the confusion and the mess, something had shifted. They were starting to understand each other. Grayson woke up to a strange sound one morning. It was early, and the sun hadn't even fully risen yet. At first he thought it was just the wind, but then he realized it was something else. Something soft and rhythmic, like someone humming. He sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes, confused. The sound was coming from the kitchen. Slowly, Grayson got out of bed and made his way down the hall. When he peeked around the corner into the kitchen, he stopped in his tracks. There, standing on a chair, was Sari. She was holding a spoon and tapping it gently against the counter, humming a tune that Grayson didn't recognize. Her eyes were closed, and for a moment she looked peaceful, almost content. It was the first time Grayson had seen her so relaxed. He didn't know what to do. He had always thought of her as a challenge, something to deal with. But now, seeing her so carefree, something inside him shifted. Maybe this wasn't as hard as he had made it out to be. He cleared his throat to announce his presence. "What are you doing, kid?" Sari stopped humming immediately, startled. She turned to face him, her wide, glowing eyes a little embarrassed. She set the spoon down carefully and climbed down from the chair. I was trying to make breakfast," she said quietly. Her voice was soft, almost shy. And Grayson noticed that she had already started gathering ingredients, half of which she had no idea how to use. Grayson couldn't help but smile a little. "Breakfast, huh? No, that's usually my job." He walked over to the counter and looked at the ingredients she had chosen, some odd mix of fruits, grains, and a few things that didn't belong in any meal he had ever seen. Sari's face fell. I wanted to help." Grayson sighed and patted her on the shoulder. "It's fine, kid. But next time, maybe we can try it together. Yeah." Sari nodded, her eyes lighting up with a spark of excitement. She had been trying to learn everything she could, and it made Grayson feel something he wasn't used to, a sense of responsibility. He wasn't just looking after her, he was teaching her. Over the next few weeks, the two of them spent more time together. Every morning, they would try to make breakfast, though it was never perfect. Sometimes Sari would accidentally break an egg, and other times they would mix up the ingredients, but that didn't matter. Grayson found that the time spent together, however messy, was something he looked forward to. The change in Grayson as Grayson watched Sari grow more confident. He began to change too. He wasn't the same man he had been when she first arrived. He had always kept to himself, avoiding close relationships. But now, with Sari, he found himself opening up in small ways. One night, after they had spent a long day fixing things around the house, Sari asked him a question that caught him off guard. "Grayson, what was your life like before I came here?" Her voice was quiet, and her eyes were full of curiosity. "Were you always alone?" Grayson hesitated. It was a question he didn't want to answer. Wasn't ready to talk about his past, about the things he had done, the mistakes he had made. But looking at Sari, he realized that maybe, just maybe, it was time to share a little of it. He sat down next to her, rubbing his chin as he thought. "Before you came, I wasn't exactly living the best life," he said slowly. "I was in the military. Fought in wars, lost a lot of friends. I didn't have time for anything else, and I sure didn't have time for family. Sari listened carefully, her eyes soft with understanding. She didn't interrupt, just let him speak. I left it all behind, he continued. I didn't want to be around people anymore. I figured it was easier to be alone. No one to care for, no one to disappoint. Sari didn't say anything at first. She just sat next to him, her presence calm and comforting. Finally, she reached out and touched his hand gently. You're not alone anymore, she said simply, her voice small but full of meaning. Grayson's heart skipped a beat. He had always thought that being alone was easier. But now, with Sari, he wasn't sure anymore. He wasn't sure he wanted to be alone. Unexpected moments of connection, the days continued to pass, and Grayson found himself growing more comfortable with the idea of having Sari around. He never expected it, but there were times when he actually enjoyed her company. It would sit together in the evenings, reading books, or just talking about their days. The little things like the way she asked him endless questions about Earth, or how she tried to understand things he took for granted, became the highlights of his day. One evening, as they were sitting outside watching the stars, Grayson couldn't help but ask her more about her life before the crash. He had learned that she was from a peaceful planet, a place where harmony was valued above all else. It seemed so different from Earth, where conflict and war seemed to rule everything. What was it like on your planet? Grayson asked, his voice soft. Sari looked up at the sky, as if searching for an answer among the stars. It was beautiful, she said quietly. People lived together in peace. We didn't fight. We helped each other. Grayson listened, amazed by her words. He had never known a place like that, where everyone worked together without fighting. It made him think about Earth, about all the fighting that seemed to define humanity's history. I wish I could see it, he said, his voice almost a whisper. Sari looked at him and smiled gently. Maybe one day, she said. But you have to remember, you're not alone anymore. You're here, and I'm here. Grayson couldn't help but smile back. For the first time in a long time, he felt something deep inside, a sense of hope. Dow! It wasn't about being alone or being strong. It was about finding someone who understood him, someone who cared. The little things that matter. As the weeks went by, Grayson noticed how much Sari had changed. She was more confident, more comfortable in her own skin. She had even started to help him more around the house, learning how to do chores like washing dishes or fixing small things. And the more she learned, the more Grayson realized how much he had learned too. There was one day when he had to go into town to take care of some business. When he returned, he was surprised to find that Sari had done something unexpected. She had cleaned the entire house, every corner, every room without being asked. It wasn't perfect, but it was the thought that counted. Grayson stood in the doorway, staring at the spotless room, felt a rush of emotion, something he wasn't used to. He wasn't just taking care of Sari anymore. She was taking care of him too. Kid, this is amazing, Grayson said, his voice cracking just a little. He cleared his throat quickly. Thanks. Sari turned to him with a big smile on her face, her glowing eyes shining brighter than usual. I wanted to help, she said. I want to make you happy. Grayson felt something shift inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. This little alien girl who had come from so far away had somehow become more than just a responsibility. She had become a part of his life. As he looked at her, Grayson realized that he had found something in Sari that he had been searching for all along: a connection, purpose, family. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he had once thought. It had been several months since Sari had come to live with Grayson. Their relationship had evolved in ways Grayson never expected. The house was quieter now, filled with the hum of Sari's experiments, her laughter, and the occasional sound of Grayson grumbling as he tried to teach her about Earth's ways. He had grown used to her presence, to the point where it felt right, but peace, as Grayson had learned over the years, never lasted long. One evening, just as Grayson and Sari were finishing dinner, the peaceful atmosphere of their home was shattered by the sudden ringing of the doorbell. Grayson's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't expecting anyone. His first instinct was to ignore it, but something told him he couldn't. Stay inside, Grayson muttered to Sari, who was sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes wide with curiosity. Sari nodded. her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She had learned to follow his instructions, but she always wanted to know what was going on. Grayson could see it in her eyes, the same curiosity he had seen since the day she arrived. When he opened the door, he wasn't prepared for what he saw. Standing in front of him was a man dressed in dark, high-tech armor, his face hidden behind a visor. He looked like a soldier, but not like any soldier Grayson had seen before. This man was different. There was something cold, almost calculating in his eyes. "Grayson Holt?" the man asked, his voice low and controlled. Grayson narrowed his eyes. "Who wants to know?" The man didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, his movements deliberate. "I'm here for the girl," he said. Grayson's heart tightened. He knew exactly who the man was talking about. His instincts kicked in. He had always been good at reading situations. This wasn't good. "The girl's not going anywhere," Grayson said firmly, his voice hard. "You need to leave." The man didn't move. Instead, he took a small device from his belt and pressed a button. A holographic projection flickered to life between them, showing a map of the galaxy. It zoomed in on a planet far from Earth, a place Grayson had never seen. "This is where she belongs," the man said coldly. "Sari is a fugitive, a traitor. She's wanted by the authorities of her home world for defying their orders. We've come to bring her back." Grayson's mind raced. Sari had never mentioned anything like this. She had always spoken about her planet in glowing terms, telling him stories about peace and harmony. But now, hearing this, it made sense. Her people didn't seem the type to let anyone get away. "I don't care what she's done in the past," Grayson said, his voice low and steady. "She's with me now, and I'm not letting her go." The man's expression didn't change. "You don't have a choice," he said flatly. "We're taking her one way or another." Grayson felt his blood run cold. This wasn't just some alien diplomat or a misunderstanding. This was something bigger, something dangerous. He glanced back at the house, knowing he had to protect Sari at all costs. Without another word, Grayson stepped forward, his hand moving instinctively to the small weapon he kept hidden under his jacket. It wasn't much, but it was enough to defend himself if things escalated. "Get off my property," Grayson growled. His voice like ice, the man didn't flinch. But Grayson could see the subtle shift in his posture. He knew that this wasn't just a negotiation. It was a threat. "Last chance," the man warned. "Move aside, or we'll do this the hard way." Grayson's mind was racing. He wasn't afraid of the man, but he didn't know how many others might be out there. The threat wasn't just to him. It was to Sari, and he couldn't let her get dragged back into whatever mess she had left behind. "I said no," Grayson said, his voice firm. "You're not taking her." The man's lips twisted into a thin smile, but it wasn't a friendly one. He activated his device again, and a sharp noise filled the air. Before Grayson could react, the man's companions appeared from the shadows of more soldiers. Armed with weapons that looked like nothing Grayson had ever seen before, they moved quickly, surrounding Grayson and blocking his exit. A fight for survival. Grayson's heart pounded in his chest. There were too many of them, and he knew that even with his training, he couldn't take them all on. His only chance was to get to Sari and get out of there before things got worse. He turned to see Sari standing in the doorway, her face pale with fear. She had heard the voices and seen the figures through the window. "Stay inside." Grayson shouted, but Sari wasn't listening. She stepped out into the yard, her expression one of determination. "I'm not going back," Sari said, her voice clear and firm. Her eyes glowed brightly, and for the first time, Grayson saw something different in her, something strong. Something that reminded him of the girl she had once been before all this had happened. "You don't know what they'll do to you," Grayson said urgently. "They'll take you away." Sari didn't look at him. She was focused on the men in front of her. Her hands trembled slightly. But there was something in her stance that told Grayson she wasn't afraid. "I have to face them," she said quietly. "I have to make things right." Grayson reached out, grabbing her arm. "No, you don't. You've been through enough." Sari turned to him, her face softening for a moment. "I can't hide forever. If I don't stand up to them now, they'll keep coming. They won't stop until they have me." Grayson hesitated. He could see the truth in her eyes, but it didn't make it any easier. He didn't want her to go. He didn't want to lose her. But he knew Sari wasn't just some frightened girl anymore. She was stronger than that, okay? He said, his voice low and steady. But we do this together. Sari nodded. Together. Without another word, Grayson and Sari turned to face the soldiers. The leader of the group stepped forward, his eyes hard. This is your last warning, he said. Step aside, and we'll take her with us peacefully. Grayson stepped in front of Sari, standing tall. You want her? You'll have to go through me. There was a brief silence, and then the soldiers advanced. Grayson didn't wait for them to make the first move. He lunged forward, his instincts kicking in as he grabbed the first soldier by the arm, twisting it behind his back. The soldier let out a grunt of pain, but Grayson didn't stop. Sari, standing just behind him, stepped forward as well. Her eyes glowed brighter, and Grayson saw a flash of energy ripple through the air. The soldiers around them hesitated, momentarily stunned by the strange power she was unleashing. Stay close to me, Grayson ordered, his voice fierce. Sari nodded, and the two of them worked together, moving quickly and decisively. Grayson took down one soldier after another, using his military training to outmaneuver them. Sari, though not fully trained, managed to control her power just enough to send another soldier crashing to the ground with a burst of energy. But Grayson knew this wouldn't last long. The soldiers were relentless, and there were too many of them. He needed to think fast. We need to get out of here, Grayson said, his voice urgent. Now, Sari nodded again, her eyes filled with determination. I'll hold them off. You get to the car. Grayson's heart clenched. No, I'm not leaving you. Sari gave him a soft smile, the same one she had given him when they first met. You don't have a choice. I'll be okay. Grayson hesitated for just a moment, and then with a nod, he turned and ran for the car. He could hear the sound of footsteps behind him, but he didn't dare look back. He wasn't going to let them win. Grayson's heart pounded in his chest as he raced toward the car, his mind racing faster than his legs could carry him. The soldiers were close behind, and the sounds of their footsteps echoed in his ears, relentless and unforgiving. He could hear Sari's power crackling in the air, but he didn't dare look back. He couldn't afford to. Sari had given him the opening they needed to escape. He had to take it. Grayson jumped into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut behind him. His hands were already gripping the steering wheel, his eyes scanning the road ahead. He glanced over his shoulder briefly and saw Sari still standing by the house, facing off against the soldiers, her glowing eyes bright in the dim light. Come on. Come on, Grayson muttered under his breath, urging the engine to roar to life. He could hear Sari's voice in his head telling him to go, to leave, but his heart refused to let her fight alone. As he sped down the road, Grayson's mind raced. He had no plan, no idea where he was going, but he couldn't stop now. They had to get away. They had to find somewhere safe. Grayson had never been one to back down from a fight, but this was different. This was about more than just him. It was about protecting Sari, the girl who had somehow become the family he never knew he needed. A dangerous decision. Grayson drove through the winding streets, his thoughts consumed by the image of Sari standing alone, facing the soldiers. He didn't know how long he had before they caught up to him, but he knew it wouldn't take long. The soldiers were well trained, and they wouldn't stop until they had her. He had to make a choice: leave her behind, or risk everything to save her. The thought of leaving her, of abandoning her, was unbearable. Sari had come into his life, and in a way she had healed him. She had shown him that there was more to life than the pain of the past, more than just surviving. She had given him a new purpose. Grayson's eyes hardened as he turned the steering wheel sharply, veering off the main road. His mind was made up. He wasn't running anymore. He was going to fight for Sari, for their future reunion in the forest. Grayson didn't know how long he had been driving, but soon the familiar sights of the city faded into the distance, and the quiet, dark woods surrounded him. He slowed down, weaving through the trees, before finally coming to a stop in a secluded clearing. His car's headlights cast long shadows in the forest, but it felt safer here. There was no way for the soldiers to follow without being seen. Grayson sat still for a moment, listening for any sound that might indicate danger. All he could hear was the rustling of the leaves in the breeze. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. Then he heard it. The faint sound of footsteps, barely audible over the wind. Grayson's eyes shot wide open. He didn't need to guess who it was. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was Sari. Her clothes were a little torn, and her hair was disheveled, but she was standing tall. Unscathed, her glowing eyes fixed on Grayson. The relief that washed over him was almost overwhelming. She was okay. She was safe. "You came back," Sari said. Her voice filled with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. Grayson let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. "I couldn't leave you," he said simply. Sari stepped closer, her eyes softening. "You should have. It's too dangerous. They'll come after us." Grayson shook his head. "They can try, but they won't get you. Not while I'm here." Sari smiled, and Grayson felt a strange warmth in his chest. He had never cared for anyone the way he cared for her. It was a feeling he wasn't sure how to deal with. "We need to go," Grayson said, turning toward the woods. "We can't stay here." "Not for long." Sari nodded, but her eyes were still on him. "You came back for me," she said softly. "Why?" Grayson didn't answer right away. He had never been one to share his emotions easily. But as he looked at her, something inside him finally clicked. "Because you're family," he said, his voice steady, but with an undeniable sincerity. "And family doesn't leave each other behind." The chase continues. Grayson and Sari didn't have much time. They knew the soldiers would be on their trail soon. Grayson led the way, moving quickly through the forest, with Sari close behind. Her glowing eyes helped light the path in the dark, but they needed to be careful. They couldn't afford to make any noise. As they moved through the trees, Grayson kept his ears open for any sound of pursuit. Every crack of a branch or rustle of leaves made him tense, but they didn't stop. They couldn't afford to. "We're almost there," Grayson whispered, pointing to a small cabin up ahead. It was hidden deep in the forest, far from civilization, a place he had used to stay during his time with the military. They reached the cabin just as they heard the faint sound of footsteps behind them. The soldiers were getting closer. Grayson hurried inside, pulling Sari through the door just in time. They locked it behind them, and Grayson quickly moved to the windows to check the surroundings. He could see shadows moving through the trees. The soldiers were closing in, but they hadn't found the cabin yet. "We have to hold out here," Grayson said, his voice urgent. "We'll wait until it's safe." Sari looked at him, her face full of determination. "We can't hide forever. They'll come for us again." Grayson nodded. "I know, but we'll make them regret it. We're not running anymore." A final stand as the hours passed. Grayson and Sari kept watch from the cabin, knowing the soldiers wouldn't give up. But they weren't just going to hide. They had a plan. And Grayson was ready to put it into action. When the first soldier finally appeared outside the cabin, Grayson didn't hesitate. He knew what they had to do. The soldier was close enough for Grayson to hear his breathing. And he made his move, grabbing a nearby piece of wood and rushing the soldier. The soldier barely had time to react before Grayson knocked him to the ground. Sari's voice was calm, but Grayson could sense the power in her words. "Don't hurt him," she said. "We don't need to kill them." Grayson paused for a moment, looking down at the soldier. He wasn't interested in killing anyone, but he couldn't let them take Sari. "You're right," Grayson said, stepping back. "We'll do this our way." Instead of finishing the soldier off, Grayson used the ropes he had stashed in the cabin to tie him up. Then they moved quickly, taking the soldier's communication device and using it to send a warning to the rest of his team. They weren't going to give up. Not without a fight. As the soldiers gathered around the cabin, Grayson and Sari made their stand. Sari, now more in control of her powers, used her energy to block the entrance, creating an invisible barrier that the soldiers couldn't break through. Grayson fought with everything he had, but he knew the real strength lay in their unity. Finally, after what felt like hours, the soldiers realized they weren't going to win. They retreated, leaving Grayson and Sari standing victorious in the quiet of the forest. Grayson looked at Sari, breathing heavily. "We did it," he said, a smile tugging at his lips. "We're free." Sari's eyes shone with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I couldn't have done it without you." Grayson looked at her, his heart full. You don't have to thank me. You're my family, and family sticks together.